All right, we are good to go. So again, I just want to mention for this afternoon's event, we're going to use the chat function as our main source of communication. So change that little blue button from host and panelists to everyone so we can chat together. As a reminder, we're all here to learn and have a good time. So let's be kind and courteous to one another. So let's get going. We're super excited to have you here. We want to welcome you to Flatiron School's Breaking the Binary LGBTQIA plus representation in tech panel. My name's Catherine Sommerfeld. I'm the Director of Marketing Campaigns and Events here at Flatiron School. And part of my team's job is hosting free introductory workshops like today's event to give you the opportunity to meet some of our instructors, and in this case, our alumni and our students, to get a better feel of the Flatiron School experience. A quick reminder, we'll be using the chat. I think I've said that enough at this point, probably. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guests today. We have Alyssa Osterbach here from our admissions team. So if you have admissions related questions, please ping them into the chat and Alyssa will be here to answer those for you. And Yesenia Follingstadt, who is representing our community team and is going to take it away from here. So take it away, Yesenia.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Yesenia Follingstadt, and I'm the community manager here at our Denver campus for Flatiron School. I'm super excited to be moderating today our Pride in Tech panel, and I can't wait to chat with our panelists as we discuss a variety of topics. So ranging from LGBTQIA plus inclusion in the workforce to the never-ending coming out process and so much more. So today we're joined by, like Catherine said, alumni, staff, and current students, and we're just here to celebrate all things LGBTQIA+. So I got a few questions I want to ask, but first, again, just to drive it home one last time, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat and we will make sure to get them answered by the end of it. So let's get started. First off, let's have each of our panelists introduce themselves. Let's do your current role, your company, and what your company does, and then please be sure to include your pronouns. Ryan, would you mind starting us off?
Happy to. Hi, I'm Ryan Basham. My pronouns are he, him, his. Although sometimes I respond to hey girl. I'm a senior team lead on the career coaching team, and I lead the LGBTQ Affinity group, and I'm really excited to be here. Did I cover everything?
Yes, you did. Katie, would you mind going next?
Sure. My name's Katie. Currently, I am enrolled as a full stack developer in the Flatiron Flex program. I currently work at an ed tech company called ClassKick, doing customer support and support engineering, and slowly transitioning my way to being a full stack developer on the team. Did I cover everything? Oh, and she, they.
Thank you so much. Sam, would you mind going next?
Hey y'all, my name is Sam. I'm coming at y'all from Tampa, Florida. I'm currently enrolled in the data science program at Flatiron, working at my capstone project, almost done. The end is in sight. I'm going through a career change coming out of sort of environmental sciences, landscape architecting, anything to do with plants, into a more tech-focused role.
Awesome. Siana, will you finish us off?
Right on. Siana, coming to you from the heart of a very beautiful tropical city in South America, and I am a learning designer that focuses on helping people become radical humans. Oh, and my pronouns are she, they.
Thank you so much, all of you panelists. Catherine, do you want to kick us off with our first question?
Absolutely. And this is for everyone. Why did you want to be on this panel? I know it can take a lot of courage to do something like this, so I just really want to celebrate that and then hear more about what your motivations were. Do we want to go same order and start with Ryan again?
Sure, happy to. Excuse me. I think it's really important that that people in a position to be visible take that opportunity to take up that space. I wouldn't say that I set out from a young age to be an LGBTQ rights activist, but that is something I have become. And something I think about a lot is that members of the LGBTQ community, we didn't set out for our lives, for our existence to be political, but that was done to us, and it affects us in every corner of society. And so whether or not it's fair, I think it's incumbent on each of us to be a part of the fight to make the world better for each other and for the members of our community that will come after. And no one can do that for us. That's a thing that we need to do ourselves. And so I think, I jump at every opportunity to participate in anything at all that might move the ball forward. And I'm really glad we're doing this and happy to be here for it.
That's awesome. Thank you. I have to look in our Slack and see if I'm in that LGBTQ affinity group, because I don't think I am. Got a new member today, Ryan. All right, so let's go to Katie next. And again, that's why did you want to be part of this panel?
Yeah, I mean, I think something that I'll certainly be talking about a lot. One thing I forgot to mention in my intro is that I'm actually coming from K through 12 teaching. I used to be a school teacher. And as both someone who's transitioning their career from what is often considered like a martyr job or a service-oriented job, and as a queer person, is that I experience a lot of imposter syndrome. And actually something that we as queer people have is like tons of interesting, unique life experiences that give us something to say and make us experts in all kinds of different ways that many people who don't identify as queer LGBTQIA plus just don't have. And I totally agree with Ryan. Any way to participate, move the ball forward, and just share life experience is just so important. Like, we all have something to say. And I think that was kind of my inspiration for joining the panel. Is I've just dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome within the past probably like 10 years of my career. And I'm trying to actively work towards speeding that and making the world a better place.
That's awesome. Thank you. And we're so glad to have you here. I think so many people relate to that idea of imposter syndrome. I mean, just so many different ways in our everyday life. Sam, you next.
Definitely resonating with what Katie and Ryan said. I think you think of tech roles and you think of, Mark Zuckerberg and the social network, and you just see a bunch of bros like locked in coding, and you're like, that's not me. That's not what I look like. So, I want to be here today so that people who came out to this saw that people like me, were doing tech roles, and also just to remind people that the LGBTQ community has always had a role in tech. My background is actually an infographic from Florence Nightingale, who was the founder of modern nursing. And she was actually made some of the first infographics in the mid 1800s, which we continue to use to this day. Other people like Alan Turing, who literally cracked the code in World War II, and then when we found out he was a homosexual, he was, forced into sterilization and didn't get his moment in the light, So the LGBT community has always had a strong role in tech, and, we deserve to be here, and we have been here, and we need to continue being here.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. That's something that we tried to highlight this month in the campaign that we did for Pride. We featured Alan Turing. We talked about a whole group of people, one every week, who were impactful in tech. And to be perfectly honest, I was the one who did that campaign. I had so many people to choose from. It's just a really vast contribution that I don't think people realize. Siana, you are last, but certainly never least, because I know you're going to have something wonderful to say.
Yeah, it's beautiful to be in this space and to be able to share stories and encouragement. I think media does such a good job of like portraying not the negative, but also the negative. And it's nice to be able to hear the stories of folks who are like pushing the envelope despite difficulty. I recently was in a conversation with people who identify as Black and queer, African American and queer, and talking about the difficulty in the self-identification when like applying for roles, and how they would rather lie about it sometimes than to be honest about who and where they are, and like who gets what information, and does that affect placement or like consideration for candidates. And it's like the extra work that goes into just being who you are and how the world views you, and breaking the stigmas around that and saying, hi, we're human. You know, we might actually bring you a better perspective on things, you know, or a different perspective on things that maybe you didn't consider because you keep hiring the same kind of person. So yeah, that's why I'm here, because I think, well, I know the representation matters, but also our voices matter and our stories matter. If people connect with stories, then they kind of don't, doesn't matter who the human is, you know, if you hear the story. So yeah, it's just a matter of like, if it's a meeting and you push, you know, camera off, it's still the voice, it's still the person, but you're not, that intrinsic bias isn't kicking in and saying, well, this person looks like and they believe this. It's just our stories, and those matter a lot more than who we are and what we like, and yeah, the things that people hyper focus on to discredit who we are.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Siana. Okay, Yesenia, I'm going to throw it back to you for the next question.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for sharing your heart behind you, joining our panel again. Like you said, like, it's just such an honor to have you all here. So thank you. For our students, what were you doing before enrolling at Flatiron School, and what inspired you to pursue a career in tech? Any one of you is welcome to start us off.
I'll go ahead. I was, like I said, I was doing mostly K through 8, K through 12 education. I was a STEM teacher, so I was teaching science, technology, engineering, and math. I have a master's degree in instructional technology, and I loved doing like simple engineering projects. I was getting 5th graders to create little light shows and make little electronics with Arduino and do some simple like processing, P5JS, like really cool interactions. And, you know, getting a 10-year-old to make a for loop is just a really exciting moment. And I had always thought about transitioning my career to be more tech oriented. And particularly, like, unfortunately and very bleakly and grimly, like the state of things that teachers are facing is, I don't feel very optimistic about it. How things are in schools. I was even teaching at a private school, and it just was increasingly feeling like sort of an unsafe environment, in all different kinds of ways, socially, financially. So I kind of knew it was my time to transition my career and combine my skills of being obsessed with tech and engineering and working for an ed tech platform, and becoming the practitioner of the things that I would teach. So that was my decision. And I'll be talking about that a lot. It's really, really wild to transition from like the education field into a completely different field.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, we have a lot of teachers who come to Denver campus too that we interact with, and it is wild. But all those skills that you have as a teacher are just going to help you really thrive in the workplace. So thanks. Sam, would you mind going next?
Yeah, I too, like Katie, am coming from a education background. I was doing environmental education, community organizing, also just working out in the field, doing landscaping, and while I adored those jobs, they were emotionally exhausting, and also it's frustrating, like Katie said, to work with sometimes a district that doesn't always have the best interests of students and teachers at mind. So my favorite part of the job was always just kind of like looking at my Excel sheet at the end of the day, looking at what the data was telling me about my students and seeing, okay, if we were going to make adjustments to improve, the curriculum, this is what it would look like. So I got more and more piqued by the data side of things and how we can use data to improve our day-to-day lives and to fine-tune, people's experiences in the real world. So I really wanted to start leaning into a more tech-focused career because I felt like that was a great way to implement change.
Love that. And love being like open to the process, to like seeing where you're at, taking that passion, just kind of like funneling it to a different area. That's awesome. Siana, what were you up to before you joined Flatiron School?
Oh, I'm an alumni, not a student.
My bad. No worries. Catherine, are you ready for the next question?
I am ready for the next question. All right. So as you were looking to start your education or your career in tech, did you experience any specific obstacles? And if you did, can you share a little bit about how you were able to push past them?
Can I please start?
You can start, Siana.
Okay. So, all right, let's add like an extra layer. Getting into, before I got into tech, so before I got into tech, I was working with a Fortune 500 company, which was super exciting. And I was helping them build their learning experiences. Mister, stop, baby. Helping them build their learning experiences and design, and it was amazing. I was contracting just to kind of like build my portfolio, and it was adding the extra layer of neurodivergence in my, like, how do you personally identify, right? Now, that's not information that I like broadcasted to my team initially, but what was interesting is even after sharing with like the team manager, like, hey, you know, I'm on I think different, I process information differently, and sometimes I communicate differently as well. So these are, if you experience this with me, this is what it means, and this is how we can like problem solve, and this is how we can communicate through it. And there were three different, sorry, it's my dog. There were three different examples that I gave that I knew could potentially come up, and sorry, he's eating my plant. And so it was completely disregarded. It was completely disregarded. And when an exact situation popped up, I went back to the email and said, hey, this is something that like I would really like for you to consider this. And I was let go from that team. And it was pretty immediate, like with no consideration whatsoever. And so I feel like, and I'm not putting our identities on the same spectrum as neurodivergence, but I do feel like things that are different from the norm, it was a very conservative company, the things that are different from the norm tend to be disregarded, even though communication is like upfront, you know, like dealing with the fact that people have a hard time processing things that are different from them is tough. But I still lead with that same grace and compassion that this is who I am, and this is how I communicate, this is how I show up, and these are the ways that we can solve this problem. It's like building a relationship, you know? But yeah, it was a little discouraging, but also like, you know, people be peopling, and there's nothing that you can do about it other than accept them the way that you also want to be accepted.
Absolutely. And also, Siana, just from knowing you for a little bit now, that was entirely their loss. And also, as a manager of people, like you did exactly what I would love people to do. Come and tell me how you want to communicate, how you want, you know, like how you want me to be able to understand you. And I'm more than happy to do that because we've all got to be here together. Does anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, you know, my first job in the tech world was I was employee number 3 at a entertainment tech startup, and there were resources available to us as an organization because I was the only LGBTQ person, and so I think one of the things I took away from that was almost anything that's a liability can also be an asset, and I think the reality is that all of us who are othered in whatever communities we belong to or are associated with, we're just going to pay more prices than people in the majority, throughout our lives. And so I feel like we are better off being assertive, as Siana was just describing, with people in the majority, and knowing that we might pay prices for that are not great anyway. We already are who we are, and even those of us who don't look different, our differences tend to surface. And so I think I have for myself decided that any opportunity I have to be assertive about who I am and the parts of me that are traditionally and still today othered, does a couple of things. One is it forces most people who discriminate do it from a place of ignorance. They don't mean to be horrible people. That comes from somewhere. Usually they're raised with it. And often the only way they'll change is if they're directly exposed to people who belong to the group that they discriminate against. And so while it's risky and dangerous to be out about who we are, as I said, we already face those risks. And I think for me personally, if I can, on my deathbed, hopefully many decades from now, know that I exposed people to LGBTQ existence, at least a few people, in a way that they would not have otherwise been, my lifetime meant something. It made a difference, at least in some small way. And that doesn't mean it's fair. I think actually something we do a lot in our, overlapping communities is compare privilege, which is kind of a race to the bottom. And it also serves to divide us. All of us in every kind of other group we can think of are in the minority unless we are all together on the same page, with one exception, and that's cisgender women. However, of all of us, cisgender women are the most known for fighting against, or not, contributing to the things that hold them down. So, we need to be in this together, and we also need to be explicit about supporting people who may not be a part of our community, but are part of other communities as well, and standing up for each other and fighting for each other in those moments. Sometimes we're going to end up in a room with only conservative people who don't get it, and they punish us for that. But the more we stand up for ourselves and for each other, it's all those little drops that become an ocean. And so I got into more and more being an activist in the professional space for that reason. And at this point, I'm totally fine with making people uncomfortable by being explicit about who I am and what it means. And, if I have to pay a price for that, so be it. There will always be other opportunities. And as long as we band together, we can always lift each other up.
Thank you, Ryan. Sam, Katie, either of you have anything you want to contribute on this one? And don't ever feel like you have to. I just want to make sure I don't skip anyone. Okay, cool. Then we will move back to Yesenia for our next question.
Righty, panelists, can you talk to us a little bit about what does Pride Month mean to you, and how do you like to celebrate and engage with the community? I don't want to put anyone on the spot. Anyone's welcome to jump in.
I guess I can start. I call Pride Month Gay Christmas. It literally does feel like Gay Christmas to me. It's to acknowledge the reason for the season, to pay homage to, our elders like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. It's to shower each other with gifts and blessings. It is to be joy and gay and merry. Pride Month for me is Christmas. It's Gay Christmas.
I love that.
I do
else wanna add?
agree with Sam very heartily. There is a part of me, like before Pride Month starts, where I get extremely overwhelmed, and like the parties and the outfits and the glitter, and that I get like overwhelmed, and then I actually go out into the world and attend these events, whether they're virtual or in person, and I'm just so flooded with reminders of like how truly amazing it is to be in this community, to have representation and reflection, mirrors and windows, and it really does make me so so very proud. And I think it's an extremely uplifting season. And I do call it my high holidays. Like, I'm taking off work for my high holidays, thanks. But there is that moment. So I think if you're also someone who's like the crowds and the pomp, you know, I get that too. Like, if you're someone who maybe tends to avoid that kind of overwhelming event, I really understand where you're coming from as well.
Yeah, I do also kind of think of Pride Month as the high holy days. I as an activist, somehow every year Pride gets more and more busy for me. So I do kind of have a here we go again kind of attitude about it in May. And I think, you know, a lot of people we know, all of us are queer people who know people. And as a result of that, we know people who know queer people. But there are lots of people in the world who don't, who only have, you know, stereotypical associations with who we are. And I think part of the value in Pride festivals, Pride events is being seen, you know, existing at all is a subversive act. Getting together and celebrating who we are and our differences is very much a subversive act. It can also be fun, it can also be joyous, but it means something culturally for our larger society. And so, you know, even people who don't feel like Pride festivals are kind of their jam, I encourage them to show up and be seen. Because for some people in our society, the only time they see that we exist is when they see on their local news the Pride Parade and all the people who are in it and all the people who attend it. And so, you know, Pride is about celebrating ourselves and each other. And it's also, of course, this is the activist in me always saying this, it's always also an opportunity to, again, make a little bit of difference. And not just in the world of people other than us, but also for each other. When we get together, we get to be reminded that even though in our own little lives with largely heterosexual, cisgender people, we still have a community. You know, there's still so many of us, even if we don't see each other every day.
Siana, no pressure, but if you want to add anything, totally can. If not, we'll go on to the next question. All right, Catherine.
All righty. So as we know, coming out is really a lifelong process. What has your experience been like being out in the workplace? And do you feel like you're able to safely be out and do your work? Anybody want to go?
I will just say I am currently having a very positive experience with this. At my current company, it's a small team, but they have made it a point to hire a pretty diverse staff on a few different fronts. I do feel safe at my work, and it is extremely liberating. Again, as a teacher, it was not always safe for me to be out given the constituents that we were serving. And it's awful to be in the closet. For me, it's awful to be in the closet. I always think that this is one of those obstacles that folks who do not identify as LGBTQIA+ never have to deal with, is asking yourself if it's safe for me to talk about my pronouns, what I did this weekend and who I did it with, my partnerships, my relationships. People don't always have to bear the brunt of that. And it's still something that I think people have to ask of themselves a lot in the tech world is this safe for me to talk about this? And again, I think I got lucky. I think there's a lot of extremely homogenous teams and companies out there that do not have the adequate resources to deal with any sort of marginalization of folks. And we know, particularly with layoffs that are going on and the recession happening in the tech world, that oftentimes, even if your team does have a DEI component or an HR component, oftentimes that's used to serve the company, and oftentimes that gets cut first. So I guess I'm here to just say, like, it's possible to have an extremely positive experience with a team in tech. But it's also oftentimes, if DEI isn't at least an afterthought, it's just not there. So yeah, it's always that asking if you're safe or not.
Thank you, Katie. Does anybody else have anything they want to contribute?
Yeah, I could say a few things. I guess, for me, I feel like I didn't really have a choice in coming out in the workplace as a butch lesbian. There's no hiding who and what I am. So I guess for me, it's always been more, people are going to know who I am. And it's been more having to quell my own anxieties, constantly having this little voice in the back of my head being like, I heard my coworkers saying some weird stuff the other day. And, while I've had the luck of no one saying anything blatantly awful to my face, I know there are whispers in the background, and that can really, undermine you and make you feel anxious at work and make you feel like an imposter. And I think the biggest hurdle I've had to overcome is to just constantly build up that confidence and, feel like I belong here. I don't care what my coworkers think. If they have negative thoughts, that's not my responsibility, that's theirs. And that takes, a load on you, and it's just more labor you have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we spend more time at work often than we do with our families. So it's a tough space if you don't feel safe. Thank you, Sam. I really appreciate that. And thank you, Katie. Siana, Ryan, anything to add? Otherwise, we will move on to the next question. Okay. Yesenia, back to you.
All right, we've been talking about this a little bit already. Many of you dedicate your free time to advocating for more diversity in STEM. Can you share why this work is important to you and how you've been able to use social media to build community?
I can share about that. I have, aside from my 9 to 5, I have this whole other part of my life that is activism and engaging the political process. And, and social media is actually a really great way to reach people. But even then, it kind of, algorithms deliberately siphon us into groups anyway. And so, I think it's kind of all the above approach. But as you asked that question, it makes me think of something I was thinking about during the last question, but I feel like I've talked a lot, so I don't want to talk all the time. But it's been my experience that over time, I've cultivated multiple versions of my personality. And the one I use the most is the straight passing version of myself that isn't inauthentic, but it is a specific application of my personality. And so I constantly, in fact, I remember once as a kid, and maybe I was a teenager, somebody said to me, I'm totally cool with gay people. I just don't like it when they're too gay. And I think at that time I dittoed what they were saying, and probably because I didn't want to rock the boat, but maybe also probably because of femphobia. And I think part of activism is every day showing up as your queer self. Whether it's an optional thing or not. And it's something that something I think about regularly. There are things I say and things I do almost every day at work and everywhere else that are the sanitized version of me. And sometimes, I think about, well, which of these versions is the most authentic to me? And I think I'm both all of these things and somewhere in the middle. I think the best thing we can do is capitalize on the moments we do have to make change. And this is a really sucky time to be queer out in the world, in education, in the workplace. But it puts us in a position to be activists as well. We can demand of our employers that when pressured, they stand for us. And we can demand of our employers that when they are attempting to serve our community, that it's not just an afterthought, that it's meaningful and significant. And, you know, if our employers are taking credit for supporting the LGBTQ community, but in real life it's nominal, it's, you know, that's an opportunity for us to stand up and say something. That, you know, it's going to get worse before it gets better in terms of the space we're allowed to take up in the professional world and academia and STEM. And it's important that we not let anybody take away the space we take up just because they're trying to redraw the floor plan. And so I think on social media, at work, in every corner of the world that we exist in, I think we do ourselves and each other a disservice by not being loud and proud and standing up, being ourselves and fighting for ourselves and each other. And so, you know, I don't think I could not do that at this point. I don't know what life would be without that at this point. And I would like for more members of our community to feel that way as well.
Thank you for all those thoughts. Really appreciate them. Anyone else have something to add?
Yeah, I love this question coming from like being a STEM educator. Diversity in STEM is, like Ryan said, not just nominal, but necessary. I think it was Sam who talked about like the representation of being a tech worker as like Mark Zuckerberg and a bunch of stereotypical men hacking into the mainframe. And there are a lot of people out there who think that they can solve everyone's problems without having that kind of life experience. And the fact of the matter is they have no idea how to make products accessible. There are so many inaccessible, poorly built tech products that serve such a small sliver of folks. And if you can work at a company and bring your perspective, that's something a little bit different than the norm, it contributes to the overall quality of that product. And I hate bringing it back to business, because being queer and having another marginalized identity is so much more than what you can contribute to your company or your job. But the fact of the matter is the greater perspective you get when building something, when fixing something, when debugging something, when creating a visualization, the better that thing is going to be for everyone. And it is upsetting to me to see this hegemonic norm continue to control the products that are available to the broader public. And so to me, diversity in STEM is yes, yeah. I totally agree, Ryan. That's a really great comment. Diversity in STEM is ultimately what's needed to make this world a better place, in my opinion.
Completely. Yeah. Thank you, Katie.
Sorry if I distracted you, Katie.
I was going to read your comment out loud though, Ryan, because I think it's really important. What Ryan put in the chat was including products that were intended to be built to serve the whole of society or democratize something, etc. It's likely not really for us if it's not at least partially by us.
I want to add to that. So lately on LinkedIn, which anybody that knows me knows how much I love LinkedIn, I've been pushing for people, for companies, and I know that I'm just gonna go ahead and bite the bullet with the amount of companies that I've worked with. Trying to get them to understand that there's different types of learners is like, I'm pushing a boulder uphill. But if I reach 2,000 people and only 100 of them actually consider what I say and 2 of them apply what I'm sharing, then fine, you know, then like there's a group of learners that feel seen and considered. But in that space, and just like you said, Ryan, like it needs to be by us so that we can be the voice for those who may not have the platform or may not have like the bravery yet or the language to be able to say, this is how I learn, this is who I am. And so when it comes to DEI so including like accessibility also, and that could be part of inclusivity. I'm just like, I'm ready. And I actually decided last night. So this is a really fun question. I decided last night, like balls to the wall. Like, I'm just gonna like dodge balls to the wall. So that, because what is there to lose other than people knowing that there's different types of people that have to learn and digest information. But the way that we are like pounded with only two different types of ways of learning, for example, those are like the normal ways. And then you have other styles of learning that are just not considered and dismissed. It's a part of this inclusivity like narrative that I want to join. And so my thing is sound. I'm all about sound, and audio learners, like people that learn by listening, are very much left out of learning experiences, for example. And so that's like my focus is like, let's bring in different learning styles and different types of learners, but let's also focus on people that learn differently and can't just sit there and read something and expect to learn. So like, yeah, I'm all about it. And now that I finally have the confidence to say, okay, hey, you guys, you don't have to like me, but at least consider what I'm saying. Then now I'm so excited about it. It's like, bring it on.
Yes. As something you just made me think about is, there are lots of people in the world who think that they can cover our bases for us. And, they'll fight about, well, you don't need to have, X kind of person represented, say, in Congress or in the boardroom or wherever, because the people there are inclusive already. And they don't want to get it. And it's not really for them to get. And I've said that to people before. It's not for you to get. It's for you to make space for. You're not meant to have agency on this. You're meant to share agency on this. And I think, underneath that for a lot of people, though, is not malice. It's, as human beings, we're designed to mitigate risk or scary things or things we don't understand. And so even things built to be inclusive, like HR practices, aren't always necessarily inclusive, but the people who are driving them they think that the right thing to do is to fit imperfect things into their boxes, as opposed to reevaluating the boxes they've built. And they think about the legal reasons why, and the process reasons why, and the setting ourselves up for protection later reasons why. And that ends up leaving people out. I've experienced that directly with my own neurodiversity, which I became diagnosed with more recently. And getting the support I needed had to go through processes that didn't suit my needs. And that continues to be true in more than one area of my life. And I think part of the job here is to help people who think that they're helpful to understand their own blind spots. And sometimes the only person who can do that is the person in the blind spot. And I think it's easy to back down in those moments, like you're saying. And the only thing that we can do that works is to be bold, be explicit, and make it impossible for us to be misunderstood.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm just like, feel like I just need to sit here and just take it all in. Catherine, you ready for the next question?
I sure am. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about this, and imposter syndrome already came up. So this may be a little repetitive, but if anybody has anything else they want to add, do you have any advice on being your authentic self in the workplace and overcoming imposter syndrome?
Imagine what a straight, white, cisgender man of a Protestant background and middle class or above would do in that situation. And remember that it'll probably go well for them. Some of the most successful people in the world don't have the self-awareness chip in their brain. And I don't say that to judge it. It is what it is. But remember that part of what works for them is that they don't stop to think whether they should. They don't stop to consider seriously other people's points of view, so on and so forth. So when we find ourselves preoccupied with those questions, we are selling out ourselves, because we are in the same marketplace of ideas and behaviors and so on and so forth with those people who don't have access to being as aware as we are. And as a result of that, that awareness can become self-defeating. It expresses itself in forms like imposter syndrome, or am I being too much, or is it bad for me to ruffle feathers? Most of us have a bias against upsetting people or rocking the boat. My rule of thumb for myself is, if my thinking about this starts to feel bad, I've left the land of helpful thoughts.
I was just having a conversation with a few friends of mine the other day, talking about how we can over empathize. Like, people can over empathize, and then we end up boxing ourselves in and getting like run the F over by people who aren't thinking about how their decisions are going to affect others. They're just going for it. And we see them climbing ladders. We see them getting the promotions. We see them, it's like, how in the hell they're a difficult person? Or like, did you hear what they said in the meeting last week? Or like, do you see how many people they run over? And it's like, okay, well, having to take a different route and recognizing like, no, this is right for me and this feels authentic and I'm going to move forward with this. Like, imposter syndrome, I think, happens with a lot of people who have a higher, I won't say percentages, but like who are more empathic, more empathetic, or who, last week I heard the word empathism, have high empathism, and that was in counter to narcissism. And so, yeah, I think like we've got to learn to like step into our bravery and our confidence and our courage, not so much in running people over, because right then we'll feel bad about it. But I feel like standing true in our confidence and allowing like our, what do we say, like our inner child to like use their voice. We want to be heard. We want our positions in our life stories to be heard, and doing that with such gusto is important. I think it's a practice, so like it's like, along the spectrum from like complete self-indulgence to empathy, and not to say that that's like the perfect range, but like we can teeter in the middle and stand in our authenticity without apology, and that's the best part.
I think it's that lack of apology, right? The imposter syndrome always makes you want to apologize for just being who you are and taking up that space that you are entitled to. Thank you both. Okay, Yesenia, back to you.
Thanks. I'm sure there are a lot of attendees in the audience who are feeling pretty inspired by you four. What advice do you have for folks who are considering pursuing a career in tech?
I mean, I think to echo both Ryan and Siana, just doing it unapologetically and bravely. This is a tool at your disposal that you are allowed to learn and that you're allowed to use and that you're allowed to exercise. And it's easy to feel pushed out. It's easy to feel like this is a saturated market, but you bringing your life experience and who you are in addition to this language and these tools that you'll learn at something like Flatiron makes you a very powerful force. And I know I'm trying to live without regrets, but I know I feel like I started this career transition much later in life than I would have wanted to, because I just was kind of holding myself back for those reasons. I didn't feel like I had anything to add. I didn't feel like part of this group, and that's just not true. Siana said something about standing in your bravery and being unapologetic, and you can do that with a new career path. Like, there is no criteria you need to meet to start this career, learn these languages, learn these tools, and use them to the best of your ability.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just add to that, putting on my career coach hat for a second. Your life is messy anyway. Your interactions with other humans is messy anyway. There are unknown liabilities to you anyway. You are surrounded by sand traps and booby traps anyway. All of these things are permanently true, and none of us will live to see the day when those things don't exist. And it's kind of a fundamental function of a non-homogeneous society anyway. Human interactions of all kinds are messy. Trying to avoid that is not a productive exercise. And so if you find yourself preoccupied with concerns like the ones we're talking about, one of my mentors used to say, "Oh, what the F, go for it anyway." Know that it's going to suck sometimes no matter what you do. So you might as well embrace that. Go for what you want, make the change you want to make, do the things you want to do, whatever that is, because it will sometimes suck regardless. And there's no need to pay attention to things that you don't have to. Job seekers pay attention to macroeconomic trends. People who are in the minority in any way look at the things that are the reasons why, the data why, or the personal experiences why we might have things against us all the time. None of that is useful. Do what you came to do what needs to be done, and let all the rest of that sort itself out, because most of these things we're discussing will happen on their own. And very often, we don't even need to look at it or pay attention to it before it passes us by. And over-focusing on these things can only serve to slow us down and mitigate the impact we could have.
I'm definitely at a phase in life where I'm like, F it, go for it. More times than not, the things that I haven't gone for is because I talked myself out of it. But when I look at my life and the things that I just went for, sometimes it was like, I'm just gonna put my hands over my eyes and I'm just gonna like punch my way through. I'm just gonna like go for it. But I'm gonna do it, and it's gonna suck. And I'm gonna write this email at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just gonna send it. And I'm just gonna do it, because there's more things that are working for us than things that are working against us. Sometimes we get in our own head, and we deserve to. We have space. There's space available everywhere for us. I think we just convince ourselves, like, tone it down, like don't be such a what is the word, don't be so boisterous, like we can water ourselves down. And it's like, oh, no, now is the time to ramp it up. And as they say, like in marketing, like any negative attention is still attention. There's something along those lines. But people remember the disruptors. That's the one that's what I want to say, the disruptors, and going against the status quo. And sometimes we can create the status quo within our own selves too. So going against and challenging our comfort zone is what I'm here for. This is all new development, by the way. This is not like I've been doing this for the last like 3, 4, 10 years of my life. It's just that I got tired of being scared, and I got tired of being nervous and wondering what people thought about me. I'm just like, you know what is it like to be free in my own self instead of asking permission for it? So dodgeballs to the wall.
Oh, love it. Love it. Catherine, back to you.
All righty. This is our last formal question. And then if there's anybody in the audience who has any questions, please throw those in the chat, because we'll jump to that next. So the last question is, what can Flatiron School do to make our spaces and programs more inclusive and supportive of members of the LGBTQIA plus community on both the staff and the student side?
I found like Flatiron to be a great space. I love y'all's Slack channels. As a data scientist, a lot of the curriculum for me was looking at literal databases. Sometimes those databases were just kind of traditional, like, this is what a corporate database would look like. This is what the Titanic database would look like. So I would have loved to seen more like databases kind of reflecting LGBTQ existence, you know, kind of like being like, okay, let's do some data analysis on this like historically LGBTQ phenomenon to see what that looked like. So I think that would be a really simple, fun way to even just bring in, you know, issues related to the community directly into the curriculum.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Anybody else have anything else they want to add?
I'll just add, you know, I think this is true for every company. And so I'm not singling Flatiron out, but I think being meaningfully inclusive is either a primary priority or it isn't. And the reality is a primary priority looks like something that costs money, something that costs time, something that costs primary focus and energy. And it's easy to, and not unnecessary to, be stuck on larger things that feel like they're more urgent to say the business needs or whatever. But there's a difference between urgent and important. And at some point, if anybody finds themselves spinning their wheels on what's urgent and starts to lose sight of what's important, the entire purpose of the enterprise has disappeared in the first place. So, you know, something I say to everybody everywhere I can in the business world is, you know, you are either making inclusiveness a primary focus or you're not. And the best way to find out is to ask the people in question for honest feedback. And even then it's possible to ask for feedback in a way that's biased toward positive affirmation. So I would say anybody anywhere needs to go out of their way to look for evidence that they're not doing everything they could, and find ways to close that gap. Because, you know, the reality is our entire society is driven by business leaders more so than any other group of people. And if we don't have them making us a primary priority, we will suffer.
Thank you, Ryan. Katie, Siana, I just want to give you a last opportunity to chime in if you want. Nope. Okay.
I think Ryan, I run with Ryan, like look to people finding holes in what they believe, but it takes intentionality to do that. And so it's like, yeah, I feel like it's the part of the people who recognize the space that there is to create space and to highlight the blind spots like we referred to earlier. I feel like it's up to us to say, hey, you guys, there's more room, because you're only used to what you've been used to, what you've been exposed to, and recreating that wheel. So yeah, I just echo what we've shared up to this point so far. It's worth it. It may feel like a boulder uphill, but it's worth it.
I know. I love what Ryan said about if you're going to make this a priority, it actually takes resources and money. And there's like a few quick fixes I think that could be made. And again, I'm not talking about Flatiron, but just like the corporate world in general is like to close some of these gaps. There are significant barriers that require money and resources and investigation and research to close. Those barriers can be really uncomfortable for people to knock down. So that's why we're here.
Absolutely. All right. I don't see any questions in the chat. If anybody's got anything last second, please do drop that in there. Otherwise, I will see where my script went. There it is. All right. I do want to drop the link to schedule a chat with our admissions team. They are fabulous. And if you want to learn anything about coming here to Flatiron School, they are the people to ask for it. So I'm going to drop that in right now. And again, Alyssa is here. I know she is fabulous from personal experience. So if you have any questions, please do feel free to ask her. Otherwise, I am going to thank our panelists so much for joining us. This has been such a great panel. Really appreciate you all being here and spending your time with us. And I think you really gave us a lot of insights to think about. So very much appreciate that. All right, so thank you to everybody who zoomed in to join us today. Again, I put that link to schedule a chat with our admissions team in the chat box. As a reminder, you will receive a copy of the presentation within 3 business days after our event. And if you want to see any of our previous events, you can head on over to YouTube and subscribe. Thank you again for joining us and have a great day. Thanks, everybody.